Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to By Request. Sorry, I was using my radio voice there for a minute. Would you believe I was in radio a couple times? Way back in 1971, I worked for a station in Hialeah, Florida. Hi, everybody. Well, this particular episode of By Request is going to be a little bit more low-key than the ones that we've done previously. Usually I try to look for one barn burner swing chart to really kind of stun you with, and didn't do that this week. Going to do some things that are a little bit more mellow, and a lot of it has to do with the requests. Had requests this week, and let me just add that if you haven't sent a request in for me to try to fulfill for you, please do. I enjoy the challenge sometimes of trying to find the musical track to be able to do your request. And I had a couple like that this week. Anyway, if you look down in the description of the video, you'll see my email address, chuckparduebigband@yahoo.com. Feel free to send me your request to that email address, and I'll do my best to fulfill them. And if I can't, I'll get back to you and say, is there something else you'd like to hear? But I'm doing pretty good. I'm hitting a pretty high average at finding tracks to do these things. I also want to thank those of you that have been supporting financially. You have no idea how much it means right now, because I've lost, I added up today how many performances I've lost during COVID. I've lost 28 musical performances due to the lockdown, or whatever you want to call it, here in Portland, Oregon. So anyway, every little bit helps. So you'll see my PayPal address. If you feel like sending a tip or donation, I would appreciate that. Thanks to all of you that have been doing that. It really means a lot. Anyway, here's a song that goes way back to the 20s. Everybody knows it. Everybody's recorded it. But the version I want to use was, the arrangement was written by the great Billy Byers. You know, I've talked about Billy Byers a couple of weeks ago. He was one of those unsung heroes. I mean, the guy was just a brilliant composer, arranger, trombonist, and he wrote for so many of the bands, and especially Count Basie and Frank Sinatra and Charlie Barnett. But anyway, he wrote this particular arrangement of this old chestnut in 1961 or 2 for the Count Basie Orchestra. And Count Basie recorded it on an album. It's funny, the album has changed titles like 3 times over the years, but the album was called More Hits of the 50s and 60s. It was also called Frankly Speaking, and a couple of other titles that I've seen on the album. But anyway, a few years ago, Michael Bublé took Billy Byers' arrangement for Count Basie and turned it into a vocal. So this is Billy Byers' arrangement, and I'm gonna sing Michael Bublé's part on this. That is, if the band cooperates. All of me, why not take all of me? Can't you see I'm no good without you? Take my lips, I wanna lose them. Take these eyes, I'll never use them. Your goodbye left me with eyes that cry. How can I go on, dear, without you? You took the part that once was my heart, so why not take all of me. Your goodbye left me with eyes that cry. How can I ever get along without you? You know you took the part that used to be my heart. So why not take hold of me? You know, when you pick a track that was originally recorded by Cal Basie, you can't go wrong. It's just going to swing. Well, it's Harry James time. Got to talk about the book. Thanks to all of you that have purchased your copy of Harry James Trumpet Icon on Amazon. You know, I might go 3 or 4 days and I don't sell any, and then boom, 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 I'll sell 4 or 5 in a day, and I appreciate that. And this is a book that I continue to get glowing recommendations and reviews and emails of people that have told me how much the book has impacted them in their musical life. Had a couple yesterday that just were wonderful. Guys talking about their experiences growing up with Harry's music. But the book is not a tell-all National Enquirer kind of book. It's a book about the music of Harry James, his trumpet, his orchestra, his arrangers, the record dates, live performances, jazz festivals. There's stories in the book that were given to me by former members of Harry's orchestra, and that meant a lot to have those guys kick in. You can go to Amazon, type in Harry James Trumpet Icon, or just type in Harry James. You go to the book category, and you'll see that there is a not a hardcover. There's a paperback version, and then there's a Kindle ebook. So pick your choice, and I hope you enjoy the book. But this week, I'm going to feature a tune that was on this particular album. This was Harry's last recording date with his band. And I say that because there were a couple of other record dates that Harry did after 1979 that many people don't know about. 1982, he recorded a cut with Bernadette Peters, which was probably one of Harry's most beautiful ballad interpretations in 1982. And then also in 1983, shortly before his death, he recorded an album with a Japanese vocalist named Kei Miramura, and Nelson Riddle. Well, his name was on the arrangements. I doubt that Nelson had much to do with the actual writing. Probably had ghostwriters write it for him. But they were the last recordings that Harry made. He made them in April of '83, and of course he passed away in July 1983. But anyway, one of the songs that's on this album is Help Me Make It Through the Night. And this week I got a request from my friend Paul Undersinger. Once again, Paul is not only is he a fine drummer, he has an amazing photographic eye. He's a professional photographer. He specializes in performing musicians. You know, if you go to his Facebook page and look at Paul Undersinger Photography, there's all kinds of famous, not so famous musicians in action that Paul captured with his camera. But there's also some landscapes and some buildings and other things that he's done. And he sees things in a different light than I do. I don't have that artist's eye. I'm a trumpet player and a singer. But anyway, one of the songs that Harry did on the album, Still Harry After All These Years, was Help Me Make It Through the Night. And Jack Percival, his longtime pianist, wrote the arrangement as a vocal. And at the time, in March of 1979, when Harry recorded this album for Sheffield Lab, my wife Cheryl Morris was the vocalist on the Harry James Orchestra. And she had been singing Help Me Make It Through the Night with Harry in live performances. But when they got into the direct-to-disc process, Lincoln Mayorga and the engineers did not want the vocalist to be on the album. And the excuse they gave, of course, was, well, these cuts are all so short because it's direct disc. We can only put 15 minutes on the side of an album. So Cheryl's vocal was cut from the arrangement, and actually the arrangement was cut in half for the album. Anyway, Paul Undersinger asked me if I could play Help Me Make It Through the Night, and I struggled a little bit to find a track that I could use, but I think I found one, Paul, so I hope that you enjoy this, and this is your request. that was for you. Normally I'm allergic to country music, but I made an exception. Whereas a song I purposely have avoided for my entire musical career. And the reason, and it's not a bad song. The song was, it won an Academy Award. Let me take that back. I don't know if it won the Academy Award that year. I should have researched this. But it did give a Grammy to the two singers that were on the record. It's from a movie called High Society, 1956. It starred Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra, and Grace Kelly, and Celeste Holm, and Louis Armstrong, and his all-stars. And the song was True Love. Now, the reason I've avoided it, other than being kind of a sappy, sentimental lyric, is that it's written in waltz time. And I generally don't play things that are written in waltz time because my brain doesn't run that way. But earlier this year, Harry Connick Jr. recorded a wonderful album. And on the album, it's all Cole Porter songs. And so this song, True Love, was actually the title of the album. Now, not only does Harry Connick Jr. sing and play piano, but he also wrote the arrangements. And over his career, he has written arrangements for many of his albums. And I went back, I remembered in 1989, when the movie When Harry Met Sally came out, and of course Harry Connick Jr. Sang the opening tune, It Had to Be You, and was featured throughout the soundtrack and wrote arrangements for his vocals. And when I first heard the Harry Connick Jr. arrangement of It Had to Be You, I had to wait to the closing credits because I was going to swear up and down that Billy May wrote the arrangement. It sounded like a Billy May arrangement. And as the credits rolled near the end, it did give Billy May some musical consultant type credit. So on this particular cut from True Love, it smacks of Billy May all through the arrangement. Near false endings, weird key changes and modulations, syrupy sax section in the middle of it, and you're gonna actually think at least once, maybe twice, that the song's over, but it's not. So this is the Harry Connick Jr. an arrangement of True Love. I give to you and you give to me true love, true love. So on and on it will always be true love. For you and I have a guardian angel on high, with nothing to do but to give to you and to give to me. Love forever true. Billy Mays. give to me. Love forever true. Isn't that a great arrangement? Harry Connick Jr. is a talented man. I can't say he's a young man anymore, although he's younger than me. I think he's like 51 years old now. But he's been around a long time, and he's got a wonderful body of work. Well, speaking of a wonderful body of work, I got a request this week from Ron Krauss. He's a faithful listener to these by request videos and to my YouTube channel. And Ron, I really appreciate you watching the videos and making comments and sending me these emails. But he likes the Harry James solos, and you know, I always have to feature Harry every week. But this past week, he requested a song that I've never played before. I never played it before this week. The song is I Remember Clifford. And of course, it was written Benny Golson wrote it in tribute to Clifford Brown. Clifford was tragically killed in an automobile accident when he was, I believe, 26 years old. And it was very apparent that he was going to be the standard by which trumpet players were measured if he had lived. And Clifford Brown happened to be Harry James's favorite trumpet player. Louis Armstrong was Harry's hero, but he loved Clifford Brown. And in Harry's later recordings, especially on the MGM recordings during the 60s, you could actually hear a little Clifford Brown influence on Harry. Anyway, so I listened to several different versions of this, and you know, the best versions I heard, you know, I heard Lee Morgan play it, and I heard Arturo Sandoval and Roy Hargrove and a bunch of guys. But the ones I enjoyed the most are the ones that just played the melody. It is a haunting melody that really, you don't need to add much to it for it to be beautiful. And so anyway, Ron Krauss, this is for you. I'm going to attempt to play a little I Remember Clifford.
One, two, three, four.